Joe's sort of election picture he has there I need to get one of those, sort of a grand, sort of Kennedy-esque sort of photo. Thanks everybody for joining today. My apologies for the theologians. I bothered a few moments ago when I was connected to the different webinar. Today's webinar is to talk about fundraising and offertory and giving. So I want to thank everybody for joining today. Everybody's in sort of mute only, sort of, it's almost our sort of new introduction, just like church, turn off your cell phones. So we appreciate everybody doing this, and we have a great panel today. I'll just do a brief introduction to everybody. But as you see on your screen, we have April Kerwin, who's joining us from St. David's in Austin, Texas, lovely downtown parish. She's the director of Stewardship and Planned Giving there. And also Kate Kyle, who's at St. John's in Tallahassee, who's their director of Finance and Stewardship. And my colleague, Chris Coons, who's also in Texas, who's one of our assistant vice presidents, and have worked very carefully with both April, Kate, and Joe on a number of different initiatives. So today we're in sort of a new and different place. You know, it's been more than a month or so of remote work and social distancing, and a lot of folks in the parishes have been adapting and adjusting. And really today's discussion is to talk about a number of different things. And love to get your comments in the chat function as we go along. We're going to have a panel discussion, so no slides today. Yay on that. It's always nice. But we want to kind of look at what are the things that we're doing in terms of giving. How can we adapt in sort of the new environment? How can we be a little more thoughtful about engaging people and meeting people kind of where we are? And sort of how we can make sure that we can not only sort of maintain, but sustain kind of giving throughout this process. So we'll talk about some of the unique implications of where we are, how do we engage some folks, how we can do that, best practices, new ideas, talk a little bit about some tactics, and then some strategies. So with that, I'll thankfully stop talking and only talk when called on, Chris Coons, but then we'll actually move into more of the panel discussion. So Chris, why don't you take it from here?
Thanks, Luke, and thanks everyone for joining us today. It's good to be back with this crew and working with you today. I thought what we could start with is April and Kate, if you could both just really give a brief overview, big picture of how your parish has adapted and adjusted since this all started just over a month ago. April, why don't we start with you?
Woo, it's been a ride, right? I feel like we've all been on a big roller coaster. I feel like every day is learning something new. Just a quick overview of where St. David's is at in Austin. We've got 3 Sunday services online, one with a liturgy, 1 children's, and 1 comp line. We use Facebook and Switcher, and there have been some problems with that. We're moving from a live recording to a pre-recording for the next 2 weeks to address those issues, those connectivity issues that we think we can solve within 2 weeks. Our online adult formation and our small groups have exploded during this time period. We've got 5 adult groups on Sunday, not including ones for the young ones, and we've got several throughout the week. Fortunately, we had just launched a separate website called The Abbey, and that is for online spiritual practice and learning for believers and non-believers. Everyone's welcome. And this is working out really well. We are seeing people that are not associated with St. David's, we've never seen before from around the country, belonging to our formation. And so we're not just Austin, Texas. I feel like we really are the world right now. It's pretty amazing where this is coming from. So our online numbers for worship for adults have doubled, and they may have already doubled. I haven't seen the stats this week. So we're doing great. The children and the youth formation also exploded. But the youth formation in the last 2 weeks has made a significant drop. We think Zoom fatigue. We think the kids are exhausted, and we think especially the seniors, with everything going on, they have just dropped off, and they're just like, hey, my time is over. So we think in the fall it will explode again. We are not having any in-person worship until this summer, hopefully. We don't know. We do have a task force, but we don't know when we're coming back. We do know for formation, 100% will be virtual. Nothing will be in person. So we have made that decision. We have a survey that will be launched soon. We're asking parishioners, what do they want to come back? How would they feel comfortable coming back? And when they do come back, what would they like to see happen? What would they like worship to look like, formation to look like? And we really need to hear from them to help us incorporate with our planning. For stewardship, we have learned 3 really important aspects. The first is we have got to prioritize communications. Now, we all probably knew that before, but this has been a big steep learning curve. And we also know that we've got to communicate every week by email at a minimum. And that we also have to give personal updates to our major donors. So we already know that, but I think we're going back to old-fashioned calling. I feel like I've made more calls in this time period than at any other time in my life. I feel like the phone is attached to my ear these days, and I see it being that way for the future.
Thank you, April. That's a very excellent overview and very comprehensive. Kate, if you wouldn't mind sharing just kind of where St. John's is at.
Yeah, sure. That was awesome, April. You're amazing. We're doing a lot of similar things here in Tallahassee at St. John's. I think we might be a little bit smaller than y'all over there in Texas. We are doing online streaming. That started on the 22nd of March. That was our first time. And before that, we were really not doing that at all. So we had to ramp it up really fast. We started with Facebook message, and then we quickly leverage some of the talent and gifts in our parish. Some of our real techie people have kind of come on board and assumed a big leadership role. So now we're on Vimeo. We have they keep referring to a thing called Sling. I don't know what that means or what it is, but we have a YouTube channel. We are recording. We were doing live worship, and then we went to a recording because it just kind of takes the tone down a little bit. It makes it a little more relaxing and easy for everybody, a little less stressful. We're just doing one service on Sunday, and then we just added Compline back, a spoken Compline on Sunday evenings. We have lots and lots of formation also going on with online classes and centering prayer groups, book studies, and Father Dave's doing a poetry class on Wednesday nights. So we're really using the technology, and we're really happy to see all of our people really getting on board and learning and trying and having fun and just adapting, because it's really the only way we can see each other right now. We are doing a children's chapel on Wednesdays, and our youth are having a ton of fun. They haven't quite hit the Zoom. I think our director of youth is, I don't know what she's doing, but they're screaming and having fun and doing scavenger hunts and playing Pictionary. So I think they are really happy to see and be with each other. We are also going to do a survey, which I think is a really great idea to try to, we don't know. We want to hear from the people. What do they want? What times do they want? What are they looking for? In terms of stewardship, I would say I went back through to prepare for this today and looked at all my communications for the last 2 months. And in the beginning, it was very much the focus. I didn't really realize what I was doing at the time, but my focus at the beginning was helping people make new habits, right? It's hard to make or break habits, especially good ones. And so I just was, 4 ways to give. I just kept saying, like, everything's different. We're all trying to figure this out, but God's love for us is the same as it was before. We just have to find new ways besides the plate that passes by. So text giving, online giving, mail your gift in, or use your bank online bill pay to have checks mailed to the church. So I just really hammered home that message at the beginning, but it was not really my lead message. It was, I think as a church community, we were realizing we're here because we're the church, and our mission hasn't changed at all. And our opening words were always hope and love, and we're here for you, and what do you need, and how can we come together? And then it was quickly okay, we got to make new habits. This is how we're going to go to church now on Facebook, and this is how we're going to give. We're going to do it this way. And now I feel like my communications, and you're absolutely spot on, April. Communications is everything right now. And so I'm finding my messages are changing more to stories of impact, showing, highlighting, using lots and lots and lots of images, because I think people have a real fatigue with the news, with information. It's overwhelming. So we have a marvelous director of communications, just phenomenal. And our director of youth is kind of jumping in and helping do some amazing graphics to just use as much image as we can, as many pictures as we can use, using social media and communicating the story of how we are still the church. We're still, supporting our outreach partners. We're still the staff. We're still delivering worship. It's just in a new way.
Thank you, Kate. And thank you to both of you for sharing that detailed. Clearly, you're doing a lot. You're trying to adapt and adjust to the different and variety of parishioners and non-parishioners that participate in your services every day. So that's really remarkable. Just a note to everybody that's joining us today, please feel free to type in the chat feature. That's the best way to interact with us and ask questions. I'm glad that we have a question that just came in, because it was actually going to be my next question is, have you seen measurable impact on your offertory? And could you share a little bit about what that looks like?
Sure. Well, we had a big, steep learning lesson in March. We did not do a good job asking in our virtual worship. There was kind of a non-existence of stewardship that I think my mind blanked, to be quite honest. And our giving went down $50,000, which was a huge hit in March. Now, we did pivot and learn a lot of lessons. And so for this past 6 weeks, our giving online has been up 23%. So we're right where we need to be. Whew, thank goodness. And that feels really good to see people that are giving online in new and different ways. And we're asking people that give with checks, we're asking them to pivot and move online and to use their checking and savings accounts. And that is having a big measurable impact. We're real pleased. I did learn a great big learning lesson, and Kate did a much better job than I did, but I will share a lesson learned. For our Easter letter, we usually include an offertory envelope. We've done this for years. And at the last minute, we made an Easter packet for families to celebrate Holy Week at home, which was just lovely. So everyday families and singles had something very specific to do for Holy Week, and it was very meaningful, and we got a great reception on it. But I didn't include that offertory envelope. So for Christmas, we will learn from this, and Kate can address how she was much better at this than I was.
Well, we did the same thing. That's so funny how what's bubbling up. And again, our communications team made a beautiful, we called it Holy Week at Home. And it was, I think people were so touched and pleased for that, to receive that. And we did just, Father Dave had a letter in there, and we put a little envelope in, and I did see a lot of those envelopes get turned back in, mailed in. We had a really strong first quarter, believe it or not. Our January was phenomenal. I think a lot of our people are moving to using IRAs and QCDs and these types of things, paying, their whole annual fund pledge in one fell swoop. We were ahead for the first quarter by $10,000, which was just like, whew. But we did pivot right away with that messaging of make new habits, because there was some concern and worry from the finance and stewardship folks that giving would just stop if people weren't here. So we were mindful of just saying it again and again and again. And we all know, like, you have to tell people 800 times, you're sick of yourself, but you have to keep saying the same message. In April, we were down about 12% from our budget, which I was kind of relieved. Honestly, I thought it would be worse. April is a huge month in Tallahassee. We have the most beautiful weather. It's Palm Sunday, it's Easter, it's springtime Tallahassee, it's the Word of South Literature Festival. Everybody's downtown. We have lots of people visiting. The university's in full swing. It's spring football. None of that happened. So I was really worried and happy to see, and I think our folks, maybe because I hammered them over the head 800 times to tell them all the ways they could give, they did. And so we were only behind by 12%. So I'm feeling kind of relieved.
That's phenomenal. Thank you for sharing that. One question that we've actually received is, you're already talking about a lot of lessons learned, and a lot of ways that you've adapted. But what about the CARES Act? Have you applied and received for that funding, and how has it impacted what you're doing right now, and how are you talking about it?
Sure. We did apply and receive the PPP, which means we have enough cash to pay our hourly employees through June, which is real important to us. So for our day school staff, our baristas, our sextons, and people at our church, the culture is very tuned into a living wage. That's something very important to several parishioners. And so we talk about it in those terms of keeping up with the living wage. We think it's going to be a call to action. So right now we are just educating everybody on where we're at and what we're able to do. And then we are going to pivot and turn this into a call to action when we get to a place where we're not able, where we are less than 60 days out from not being able to pay our hourly employees. So that's something that is being very well received, the information right now. We're definitely all about education right now on where we're at financially. We feel like that's the most important thing, is to reach out first and just explain our situation before we put our hand out.
Yeah, I 100% agree with all of that, April. We also applied and received in the second round. But I think we have to be careful with that message. I also wear the hat of the finance. And so, that is when you receive that loan, that if you hope to get forgiven, you have to keep all your staff and pay everybody. You can't just take the money and cut and run. And so we are very committed. We're also paying everybody. We have a cafe that we run here. We're paying our nursery workers. We're paying our musicians, whether they sing or don't sing. We're down to one because of the distancing. But that's just 8 weeks. And so, it's not like this magic panacea that nobody has to give because the government, we got this money. And so you're right. It also living wage and paying for people. But I'm starting to see that we're going to get through the summer, and then we're going to have to really take a good hard look at how we do everything, because everything's changing. So I'm starting to have conversations and thinking about budgeting for 2021. Like, it's going to look radically different and everything's going to be different. And so I don't really know, but I do know that, we, as stewardship professionals, we don't inspire anybody by saying, give this amount of money so we can make our budget, right? We give because this is how we deepen our faith in God. We're blessed to be a blessing. We are called to be generous because we serve and love an abundant God. And so that is always the higher message, that this is how we deepen our faith. This is how we grow close to God and grow close to our neighbor. And then we have the other budget conversation.
Yeah. Luke,
maybe,
please.
I would share too, just for context for folks who are on the call, both St. John's and St. David's are historic downtown churches. They're right in the middle of everything. And like most churches that are in those kind of urban settings, they do a lot of outreach to folks downtown. So, this is something that I always kind of remind folks is, we think of our churches and congregations as family and all the things that, Kate, that you just talked about. But if we were to unpack some of that and sort of take the St. David's off the marquee and explain to somebody, or St. John's, and say, we have a nonprofit that serves all these hundreds of people, does all these ministries and outreach, I think that people start to, oh, that's wonderful. You're like, well, that's St. John's, that's St. David's. So I think, also reminding people of all the things that you do, even more so in these times of need, that's what we need to do. And, we need to be thoughtful. And I think just like a family, when families face crisis or difficulty, they have to come together and have those kind of tough decisions. Kate, as you said, we might have to rethink what this looks like. But the key is having that conversation with everybody and to say, this is what we'd like to do, but we need you to be part of that. But we also we're going to be good stewards, because St. John's and St. David's have been here 100+ years and we're not planning to go anywhere. So we need to be, as the current caretakers of these places, to make sure we're in a good place for the future. So we need your help to do that. And so that might mean, in some cases, those, in terms of messaging, those who can give more, you need you to give a bit more right now. And knowing that others might not be able to, but we want you to be part of that conversation. And I think the more that probably more frequent but tighter conversations, as Episcopalians, deliberative bunch, like to sort of share and converse. But I think more conversations at a regular pace where folks do understand what's happening And it's kind of meeting people a little bit where they are, but so vital to have those discussions.
So Luke, you're really kind of getting to a point here about communicating, how to communicate, how to do it effectively and efficiently. What do you think is the most important thing that a parish should know right now about requesting money from fellow parishioners?
I mean, I think, and I'd love to hear April and Kate's comments too, but I think the biggest thing in the situation, not just for churches, but in general, you need to sort of, be willing to have that conversation. So first of all, you need to be brave enough to say, okay, I know it's not sort of days as usual, but you need to have that conversation, and you need to sort of be empathetic and be a good listener, maybe even better than usual, but you can't shy away from it. In April, you talked about, we probably didn't pivot as fast to it. I mean, how many history lessons have told us, we probably didn't move as quickly as we should have? Well, nobody knew. That's what uncharted territory is. So I think it's when you're able to do that, you're having conversations and sharing, here's where we are, here's where we'd like to be. We'd love to ask you, for example, and again, this is personalized too. So for those donors that maybe are at the top end of your spectrum, it's engaging them how they can help. Because one of the most powerful phrases in fundraising is, I need your help. And then usually the follow-up question from the person is, well, what do you need? How can I help you? So you need to be able to explain, where we think we are. So whether it's Kate or April, you talked about where we, examining some of the data. And for some people, if they're in the position to do so, they're happy to do that. And when we look at challenging times, people might sort of retrench in terms of their giving. But the places where usually the last resort places where they will take away from is going to be their parish. So the good news there is you are, for most people, their number one thing that they give to. So if they're rethinking about maybe making their gifts to maybe other things or maybe lessening them a bit, if they know they can do it and they can do it locally, because most of philanthropy happens within 30 miles of our home, they're going to do it with you, but they're not going to do it unless you ask them. And again, our job as fundraising folks is to...
Oh, Luke, we might have lost you for a quick second there.
Frozen Luke.
Frozen Luke.
Uh-oh.
We have a frozen Luke.
Carefully and developing that.
Oh, you froze up there a bit, but I think we got the last part.
I'm hopefully my face was in some contorted great look. I'm hopeful.
Maybe slightly.
Oh, good. Excellent.
Thank you, Luke. So April and Kate, could you share a little bit more about what type of stewardship messaging you're using and how and if you're adapting that depending on the parishioner? Do you know, like, if you know that they have an economic hardship right now, or maybe they're a major donor? Could you speak a little bit more to how you're modifying that messaging?
Sure. We're all used to talking to parishioners about the annual fund, about the capital fund, and about legacy giving, right? So we're all used to having those conversations, and for a lot of us, it's becoming natural to have all three conversations at one time. One thing I've learned is that parishioners are giving joyfully when we tell them we are responding to God's call. So we will make an ask specifically for this year's projected shortfall and for some equipment that we need to move forward when we come back together for worship. But just a couple of examples about how our parishioners have responded to our call to action recently is last year, we are only 4 hours away from the border with Mexico. And so last year, you probably remember those horrible images of families being stuck at the border. So we started a border team to go down weekly to give meals and provide support. And so that was a not expected, not planned, but it was a successful ask because people could see it. They saw it on the news every day. And then just a month later, we had another unplanned ask. We had our parishioner said we are called by God to help with asylum for a family of 8 from Angola. And so we quickly pivoted and asked again. So I think our parishioners are used to being extremely generous when asked. So they know this ask is coming this year. we're telling them about what it looks like in the sanctuary. In fact, I took some pictures this morning, and it's just a giant mess of wires and lights and cables and removed pews. And so I took pictures of what it looks like, and just I'm sending these out, and just that's kind of the early stages before the ask, just to let them know what our situation is.
We have not done a special appeal yet. We didn't want to, I felt pretty strongly, I didn't want to start with an ask before I knew what I was asking for, what the needs were. And so that was sort of my strategy, was to just get the message out about change your habits, try to find new ways to make your offering. We do have a Rector's Discretionary fund that we use all the time because we're a downtown church. We have people coming here all the time who are hungry, who are sick, who are homeless, who need whatever. So we help with things like bus tickets and motels and meals, medicine, what have you. We had so many parishioners just without even being asked responded and started making gifts to the discretionary fund. We had one parishioner who received the stimulus, or I'm not sure what it was called, the $1,200 that people got. She just said, I don't need this. I'm going to give it all to you. And so it was just a wonderful, wonderful act of generosity. And so people are like that. I mean, a lot of people, really, really generous people who get it, that's their first response. How can I help without you even asking? And so I feel like my job as the stewardship leader here is to show people how to get there, right? How to make little steps and little changes in the way they view the world, to be more generous and to respond in love. So if I can get more people, moving in that direction, I feel like I've done my job.
That's phenomenal. And you've both sort of referenced different mechanisms, whether it's mail or online giving. Could you both talk a little bit more about what different mechanisms you're using to send information out, and what mechanisms you're using to get money back in, and what sort of education piece, Kate, you're talking about creating new habits. Talk a little bit more about what the tools are to do that.
Sure, I'll start. So I just was looking at, we use ACS, that is our database software for financials and contributions. And I just really, for the first time, I'm utilizing the Insights dashboard. I think I had it all along, but didn't really know how to use it. And so, because everybody's asking me all the time, how are we doing? How are we doing every week? And so it's a phenomenal tool to really dive into the data. And what's so interesting is, because I have been really trying to push and migrate people to online giving since I started working here in 2017. And we had a 6% increase from 2018 to 2020 of annual fund gifts online. So we're about 60-40, 60 checks, 40 online. So that's really moving in the right direction. And I just, again, it's like you have to just talk about it all the time in all the ways. The pledge card with the stuff on the back, that we all share, best practices at SEEP, online giving. Some people aren't comfortable. I'm starting to have more parishioners who are maybe ready to get their toe in the water, but they want a little more assurance about security, because it's true that it's crazy how with what's happening in Zoom and cards being compromised and all this. And so Venco has the top level PCI compliance. And so I'll take the time to have the conversation, to reply to the emails, to assure people, but always saying, but of course, whatever you are comfortable with is what you should do. I'm here, I'll help. These are our best practices. We black out credit card numbers, we keep our records, we destroy everything, so I take the time to tell people that so that they can have a level of comfort. But we also have a lot of our parishioners who in the summertime leave Tallahassee because it's ridiculously hot here. And so for folks who have maybe are lucky enough to go to the mountains for a while, and I'll say things like, well, your giving can still continue while you're off having a wonderful summer. And that's also a good thing about the online worship world is that no matter where you are, you can come to church. So it's just so interesting how it's changing, but we're mostly pushing online giving. I've been trying my hardest to get the text giving thing off the ground, but it's like a lead balloon. It's really hard to convince people to do it. It's so easy and it's so fast. And once you set it up once, you're golden, but that's a bit of a harder sell for some folks.
Okay, I just want to echo everything you said, and you're doing such a good job with your communications. The only thing I want to add that I can think of are three things. One is we spent 6 weeks calling all our parishioners to do check-in calls. It was a big task. We had 41 volunteers, and it was 1,000 households. We were able to reach pretty much everybody and ask how they were doing, if they were affected by COVID-19, any family members, any pastoral concerns, anybody to add to the prayer list. And we let them know that we had a special fund for anybody that was affected, if they knew of anybody. And also that we had some parishioners willing to grocery shop and drop off groceries if needed. And also just to check in to make sure they had been able to access virtual worship information, just very basic things. So this was not an ask at all. There's no ask, but I think because it had the stewardship director coordinating all this, I did see money come in online. It was amazing. We didn't ask for it, but we did see checks, mostly online, and able to respond in real time. You know, thank you so much for your gift today, and how meaningful it was, and tell them we are using it to help us guide us towards the future. And that was, it was pretty amazing to see that. Also on communications and giving, we've got an incredible Facebook presence especially with our rector and staff. Our rector has a huge following. And when he does something like post a picture of him in a pink cowboy hat, you would not believe the likes. And so using our rector, using our staff for, you know, any little thing we can for stewardship really does pay off. And one thing we're doing on Facebook is having our ministry leaders just send we miss you videos and what our plans are for the future. So just those undertones of we care about you, we want to see you. Right now, we're all in this together. I mean, those messages are loud and clear, and you really can feel God's love on social media sometimes. I never thought that's a statement that I would ever utter, but I have felt it.
I think that's true, and it goes to the point of a couple things. One, in terms of sharing that with people. You know, like one of the things that would be a cool graphic to even, you know, share with folks would be, here's how many calls we made, you know, in April, you know, and in terms of talking to you, you know, and I think that's also, it can be a way to engage other people who would say, I don't know if I'm, you know, cut out to be a, you know, to be a, you know, just, you know, do different ministries, but like I can call and talk to people. I'm happy to do that. So I think that's the kind of thing where we can give people a role where they can play and sort of maybe even share what other folks, their experience was, because I think that just goes to being a closer community. You know, I think in particular, if we look at the senior population, you know, particularly folks who were, you know, in their probably 80s and older, for most folks, you know, going to church and that time they spend with folks and during the week, that's what keeps their brain sharp, and that's what keeps them healthy and out and active. And when they can't do things like that, that's where I think folks will say, hey, I know what my mom or dad might be going through right now. I bet other folks are in the same boat. What can I do to help? So I think those are the kind of things, just like when we get to the Christmas time where folks will say, hey, are we doing Christmas gifts for folks in need? People will come forward, I think, in this time too. And I think the money will come as a natural just correlation of that. Because you're talking, but I think bringing up because that's what community is all about. And what I've seen in some other denominations is they really haven't done that, or they're sort of ignoring it. And, you know, at CCS, we work with all different denominations, and I've seen a few of them where they're just not paying attention to it. And my concern is 6 months from now, there's going to be some percentage of folks who just don't go to church anymore, you know, at all. And it's because nobody reached out to say, you know, you're important to us. We want you to, you know, should be an important part of your life. The other money stuff, I think, kind of naturally occurs. But I think, to April, your point, that's something that people, I think, are overlooking or can be overlooking.
So that brings up an excellent point. Luke, you mentioned Christmas. My question for the panel is, we've talked a lot about what you've done and how you've adapted so far, but what are your plans for moving forward? How are you going to continue to stay in relationship with your parish while also maintaining your offertory?
Yeah. And so when we did the check-in calls, we had so many people tell us, I really like church and my comfy PJs and my fuzzy slippers. And that's what I'm doing from now on. My family and I are making pancakes and we're having fun. And we feel like this is a spiritual time for our family. So our clergy is saying, great, we want your family to be in the best possible place. So we are preparing for Christmas to look a lot different. We're not going to be all snuggled up next to each other, sliding over in the pews. There's going to be distance between us. We will have another Christmas packet sent out with an offertory envelope. But what I love is a lot of the virtual events these days are sending out like a little care package in advance. And so I was thinking about, wouldn't that be neat if every family got a care package for Christmas, something like that. So we don't know exactly what's going to look like, but we are expecting a lot more, a lot less butts in the pews and a lot more people at home, and trying to make it a robust virtual experience, trying to send out a lot of communication ahead of time, a lot of videos. Our videos, we're a church of videos, and our parishioners love, it can be a very simple video that our rector just shoots in front of his fireplace, and that gets a lot of hits. So just sending a lot of information out ahead of time on, this is how you can celebrate at home and at church. And we want you to do what's right and best for you.
Yeah, I'd echo that, April. I don't think it's going to be anytime soon that we have a packed house. I'm starting to think, my mind is going to the fall annual, the stewardship committee. So I've been in contact with my committee. I've been doing a lot of webinars myself. I've taken this time because my work day is different. Everything is different. So I'm trying to fill my mind with new ideas and reading more and doing more, trying to deepen my own spiritual practice. Some of the things we're doing for that community, because I think you're so right, Luke, that it's all about the community engagement. Why would anyone go to church, if there's no love, if it's not the central message of what you're doing? We started something called Parish Buddies, where we're trying to link up just two people to kind of check in with each other, it was a little Google form. Do you like text better, or phone calls, or letters, or emails? And so we're going to try to mix the generations. So I'm so excited to find out who my parish buddy is. And then we're also going to launch small groups. So thank you for sharing that. Luke sent me a great link to is that your church?
Yep.
Of all the different groups.
We can learn something from the Catholics occasionally.
It's wonderful. So many groups. So that's something that we're going to work on in June is, we have ministry groups, right? So we have people who find each other because they like to do the altar, or they like to do the flowers, or they do the parish parties, or whatever the groups are. But we want to have spiritual groups, spiritual formation. And we typically do a large fall parish dinner where everybody comes together, and there are testimonies about generosity in the church. And it's one of everybody's favorite nights of the year, but that's not going to happen. So I'm starting to think about having sharing faith dinners where we have small, maybe 8 people in a home, if people feel comfortable, of course, with some topics of conversation to have. So just some ideas like that for the future. But we'll probably also do Christmas at home, mail out with a year-end offering, and who knows what's going to happen between now and then. But I think that the key is you have to be nimble, you have to be creative, you have to address what's happening at all times in your communication. I think the worst thing you can do is to just be business as usual, because it just would seem so tone deaf. And if someone sent me a mailing with a solicitation asking, as if nothing was going on, I would just put it right in the trash. I wouldn't consider it. So just be authentic, be real, and stay engaged and help. I think it's also important for people to connect with each other, not necessarily always just connecting to the staff and the clergy, but for them to find each other and see what happens there, and then tell the story.
Can I piggyback on something Kate talked about with our annual appeal? That's been on my mind quite a bit. We are looking at this year in the annual appeal, sending it out in the fall, a small packet on what does it mean to be a member of the church, because that seems like it's changing. So our rector is writing up expectations of parishioners and core values and working on testimonials from a variety of parishioners. And then we're looking at sending that out with our annual appeal and, of course, putting it on our website, because we think it is changing. What does it mean to be a parishioner for people? So we do want to address that with the annual appeal. And so if anybody is doing anything interesting, please put it in the chat. I'm curious.
I think maybe share two quick things. One, I think going forward is much less like some communities will have, a Spanish language mass if you have a large Spanish speaking population. So I think going forward, most church communities need to think about sort of two communities and not necessarily keep them separately, but you have sort of your online community. And then, you have the folks who are there in person, because nothing will take away from the energy of physically being together. That's what we're all craving and missing, because there is something like, this is a nice dynamic, we're talking, but this is one of those things where it's interesting, at least Zoom calls and this type of interaction, the energy goes in, but it doesn't necessarily come back the same way. When we sit together, when we sing together, all those things. So I think people will be looking to that. So I think you just need to think about, you have the community who's here with us today and our community who's watching us here today. So you kind of have to be very inclusive. And my church is, I went from a very traditional church to kind of a little more contemporary church, and it was tough for me to adjust to that a little bit, but they're good. Every single service, they say, welcome to everybody who's here, shake hands with folks. We won't do that anymore now. But then they also say, welcome to everybody who's watching us, so they make a point of like, we're doing this together. So I think thanking people is important. I think sharing sort of, how we can help with each other is important. And I think the difference is I think what we normally would do is in the fall or even the summertime, we'd say, let's think out our stewardship strategy for the year. I think you're thinking out your stewardship strategy for 2 or 3 or 4 months at a time, because I think we're just going to gradually, this is not going to be a light switch kind of situation. It's going to be, kind of a little more of a kind of a heartbeat kind of thing, where I'm sure some places will open wide up, everybody will come back out, there may be some issues, and then it might shut back down again. So we're just going to find out. Hopefully everybody's healthy and safe, but I think there'll be that learning curve. So I think we just should accept that and sort of do some of our planning more of a 30, 60, 90 day kind of idea, and just revisit that. And that needs to be key stakeholders, roughly every week. You're looking at, say, how are we tracking towards the 30, 60, and 90 day goals?
Thank you, Luke. And I do want to hone in on a couple different questions that we've received. One is specifically about how are you interacting and engaging your elderly population? And do you have any recommendations for ways to engage them in a more meaningful way during this time?
Well, I think it's important to start by recognizing that there's not a monolithic group, right? They don't all have the same characteristics or traits just because of their age. Some of ours are very engaged and super high tech and like can text give and can, whip around and teach me how to do stuff on TikTok. but some of them are, really behind, and that gap is gonna, like we're gonna see in our whole society of the technology gap with children in school, with church, with work, with everything. So it's important, I think, to keep communicating in multiple channels, recognizing that people are tuned into different frequencies, right? You can't just stop sending things in the mail. You have to continue to send things in the mail with updates for the people who missed your last 2 months worth of email weekly tidbits. So we have a Stevens ministry group here, and so we have been making, hundreds and hundreds of calls and checking in, like you were talking about, April. We didn't call every single person in our parish, but we did at least 500 phone calls. We're also looking into seeing about dialing in and listening to the service for people who don't have internet connection, or not, for people maybe in assisted living or nursing homes who aren't able to manage a laptop or FaceTime or whatever, to just have a phone number that someone can dial in and they can just listen. So those are some of the things we're doing too.
And that's where I think two quick things where I think one, the sort of, do we have live services versus a pre-recorded one? So I still think there's room for both. The benefit of the pre-recorded one, and April, and I'm sure Kate, everybody's had this experience. You do it, the camera angle's bad, the lighting's bad, the sound's off. So there's some benefit to doing a pre-recorded one, but I think the other benefit, Kate, is for some of those folks that, we don't have to only go to church on Sunday, and I think that's the thing. We're all somewhat accustomed to that, but that's going to be, if some of those things can be pre-recorded, they can be delivered to somebody or sent, by a link to somebody where somebody can watch it. It could be somebody like a phone tree. Somebody's happy to go and put a DVD in somebody's mailbox or something like that where they can watch it. So I think those are some of the things you can think about. I think Wade was on the chat was talking about how to engage people. The mail and some of that group, they're very much open and into reading stuff. They go through all their stuff. So you can send something to them much more detailed and more expansive in terms of, reading and things. So don't, again, tailor your approach to each of the different groups, because you could send like an 11 by 17 big fold out piece with, things you're interested, what you can do, how you can do things. You want a parish buddy, call this number. All those, I think you can do those things. And I think that's, this is, not to use kind of war metaphors, but this is a long march that we're going to be doing. So I think we just need to think about all these things, and in your office somewhere, almost have a big board of things we're doing, what's working, what's not working. Because I think the one thing that this will be an age of, I think, creativity and innovation for all the parishes to say, hey, this worked. And maybe something that's working in San Francisco can work in Austin, can work in Tallahassee. I think we should be very open and keeping the dialogue going.
I want to make a quick plug. So we started a little Facebook group for stewardship professionals. It's called Stew Pros. And so all you have to do is just try to look it up on Facebook. I know not everybody's on Facebook. It's impossible to please everybody with the platforms. But I did a doodle poll for a bunch of people, and that was tied for first with group emails, which doesn't seem as generative in terms of idea and sharing links and creative ideas. So the Facebook group is small but mighty, but please look us up on Facebook, Stew Pros, and we can all share, if you're doing something really cool, just put it out there. Or if you have a question, I don't know what to do, what do you think? Put it out there and we can help each other.
I'm reading Suzanne's chat, and I resonate with what you're saying, Suzanne. Thank you in the chat. One thought about our homebound parishioners as we go forward is that a lot of our parishioners who are not homebound are going to be sequestering themselves at home, even if things get back to an in-person mode, because they've got autoimmune disorders or they have compromised health of a loved one. And so we are having a lot of parishioners tell us, no matter what, I have to stay home for the rest of the year. So in thinking about what's going on with the parish, we're going to continue to have all of our sermons available through a link on our website where you just hear the sermon, just the audio version, and also on our app. And then for our events, that's something that we're looking at because we do quite a bit of fundraising events through the year. And so this year, we're looking specifically at the people that are going to be home, what those events look like. So we know we'll send out a preview video. We know that we'll have a video during the event to show for anybody on, at the event in person. But for people that are home, we want to make it just as fun for them. So we're looking at, how to engage those folks there. And it may be a need to do that old-fashioned telegram, ask people, send telegrams that we can read during the event, right. Something like that for Mary Lois, that kind of thing. We're really having to be creative on our events. And so I think it's going to affect not just homebound older parishioners. I think we're looking at parishioners of all ages now.
Absolutely. One question that's probably on everyone's mind, and Kate, you sort of mentioned this, is from Sarah. What plans do you have to address a more relaxed summer schedule to keep church at the top of your parishioners' hearts?
Well, I think we tend to slow down a little bit with, the Wednesday night offerings and Zoom. We have a fabulous director of music who's doing a choir camp for children on Zoom, which is really super great and exciting because all the camps are canceled. All the parents are collectively freaking out. I'm freaking out. What am I going to do with my kids for 4 months in 100-degree weather? We're trapped inside. So I think it's a great opportunity if you have somebody on your staff who has a gift, if it's musical, if it's poetry, whatever it is, look around you to see what kind of talent and try to leverage it and share it with the parish. We're going to continue with our Sunday worship service. We don't typically have a lot of events because, as I mentioned, a lot of people aren't in Tallahassee in the summertime. So do you have anything, April, you guys are working on in the summer?
Oh,
Not hot in Austin in the summer at all.
Yeah.
Oh no, it's a nice full 100 degrees for 60 days straight. We are expecting to continue with all of our formation for all ages. If you missed the first part of the podcast, I talked about how our adult formation had just exploded, that we're seeing people from not just the Austin area, but all over. So we'll continue really promoting those small groups, those virtual small groups. We've got VBS planned in person. I can't imagine it's actually going to happen. So I think we'll have to pivot to virtual VBS, which I see other churches doing out there. So I think for us, it's a concentration on formation during the summer for all ages, and really pushing everything that we offer to people of all ages, just explaining that for people that are just new to the church and maybe not new to the summer downturn, but we're not expecting super low numbers for formation right now. So I'm real pleased with that. So we'll see how it goes.
Thank you.
I think it's a good opportunity for those small groups, for people to find each other and connect, because now we all see that you can have a really great, meaningful conversation in an hour, no matter where you are. So, yeah.
Luke, I thought I would sort of come back to you. That a couple of people have asked in the chat or mentioned, and April and Kate have also mentioned it, about events. Could you share just some insights on how people are shifting to maybe a more virtual event type format?
Sure. If you used to have some type of big dinner or other type of event, you sort of have to do a number of different things. One, if you don't have to, you're not canceling something, you're rescheduling something. And as I said, some things that might have been happening in the spring, probably the early sensible thing to think about that, to say we'd like to see if we could do something in the fall, but we're going to be thoughtful in how we do this. So just versus outright canceling something, to say we'd love to see if we could do it, and it may not be in the same format. You have to sort of evaluate when you look at those different event activities. Some things translate nicely into doing virtually, some things don't. So you just have to think about in terms of what makes the most sense for everybody, because you don't want to put a lot of time and effort into something that really might not go over well. When in terms of if the intention of the event was to raise money as well as bring people together, you sort of have to evaluate in the environment that you're in, can you still carry that out? So there's some other things that I think you can do, but it's tough to just sort of do like a virtual gala or a virtual dinner, those types of things. But you can do other different types of things that makes things interactive. Where, for example, people are playing music. Like, so for example, Christ in St. Luke's down in Norfolk. They're, in Norfolk, Virginia. They're a church that really music ministry is a big deal for them. So some of their musicians came and have played pieces together, either separately, and then they've shared that as sort of like a little mini concert. So I think there's some things that you can do that you sort of have to evaluate the effectiveness of them, but how they translate online. So I think it's one of those kind of resources that you need to put to something, and how it can actually carry out sort of in a virtual environment. Sometimes it works. I think it can work fine. Sometimes it feels a little forced. The dog said, "Quiet, Luke."
Yep. Be my old pup. Well, thank you. We're right at about time. So I thought what I would conclude with the group is maybe just very briefly, what's your biggest takeaway at this point? What was your biggest learning lesson, and what are you excited for what's next?
For us, I would say it's that good old-fashioned relationship. I mean, nothing takes the place of knowing somebody and knowing what their kids' names are, what colleges they went to, what tragedies they faced, what they're going through right now. Are they employed? Are they worried about the future? And so that's all about connecting, making sure your clergy, your staff, that we all know everybody. So I'm a big fan of every time somebody pops into my head, I love to send a text, an email, or pick up the phone. And there's nothing better than getting a fun response back. And so that's, we all know that as stewardship professionals, but it's really been driven home is that to know our folks is to love and care about them. And the best thing we can do is just reach out, even in little ways, as much as we can.
That's so awesome, April. You're so great. I wrote down, I have, I still keep a planner calendar because I love to write. And so I have this thing that I keep carrying from week to week that I wrote at the beginning of this, and it keeps me kind of grounded, and I'll just share it with you. And I like to make lists. Love and support the parish, share good news, help in the community safely, build new ways of connection, encourage generosity by deepening faith and growing closer to God, and keeping hope. I think people need us now more than ever in this world. And so we just have to remember what we're here to do. We remember Christ's love for us, and we just have to shine that outward and give people a place to find it, because it's kind of dark.
Chris, why don't I close this all out here? Looking at the hour, we've reached the hour. So it's 4:01. We're past an hour. Oh my goodness. So I just want to say thank you for everybody who joined. All I would just say is we always remember from the good book, treat others how you'd like to be treated. So if you're thinking about calling somebody, writing somebody, texting somebody, don't put it off. Do it now. So it's one of those things that's important to do. And then I think just calls like this are helpful to listen and collaborate. And I just encourage you to talk to your neighboring churches, asking what they're doing, and sort of adapt and overcome, as the Marines say. So appreciate everybody, what you're doing. Thank you. Stay healthy, and appreciate Joe and the folks at SEEP for inviting us all here today. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks so much, everyone.